Hey, Nyla.
Hi. Hi,
How are you?
welcome. I'm
Good to
doing
see
good.
you.
What about you?
We're good.
Yeah, nice
I'm,
seeing you. Thank you for,
yeah.
oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to
Um,
say thank you for joining us today.
Ulysses, come say hi to Nyla really quickly. Just wave and you can get out of the way.
He doesn't want to be on Instagram Live. Hi.
Are you
See
at
if he
home?
remembers me. Yeah, you can see my kitchen in the background, my mom's art or whatever.
Yeah. Did your
We're all at home
sister,
now.
did your sister make those, or is that another artist?
I think it's another artist. My mom ordered them somewhere, but they're pretty cool. You can see them if I move out of the way.
Yeah, I like them. That's very Maggie.
Yeah, very Maggie. I agree. Okay, so I'm going to do a little quick introduction of myself and you for
Okay.
everybody. Yeah, because nobody knows me, everybody knows you. But my name is Nyla Haj, and I'm the social media intern here at NAMI El Paso. I'm going to be a senior at Coronado. Today, I'm going to be interviewing former Congressman Beto O'Rourke because he is intimately acquainted with the many issues facing our community. But today, we're going to be focusing on mental health, specifically issues such as access to care and the challenges people are facing during this pandemic. It is even more critical to talk about it now during this pandemic because so many more people are susceptible to feelings of stress and anxiety and depression. People are worrying about their jobs, about school, about the health of themselves and their families. So yeah, thank you for joining us today to give us your insights about all of this.
Yeah, Nyla, I'm so impressed that you're doing this and that you're calling attention to something that not enough people are talking about right now. And understandably, we're consumed with news about COVID and trying to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe. And for those who are tuning in from outside of Texas, it's gotten very bad in Texas. And unfortunately, it is getting worse in terms of the transmission of COVID, the positivity rates and the testing, the lack of access to testing, the number of hospitalizations, the deaths. But within that tragedy, there's another tragedy, which is those who need behavioral or mental health care and access to care and to treatment very often are not getting it. And the fact that you're shining a light on this and elevating this conversation, I'm just very impressed and grateful that you're doing this. And so that everyone knows you a little bit better, I know your story because I know your family really well. What grade will you be going into next year? What's your interest in this? Where will you be, doing great things down the road? What's your path and mission in life, Nyla?
So I'm going to be a senior at Coronado, even though it kind of sucks because we're not even going to get to go back to school. But um, yeah, I've always been interested in government and politics, and especially when we visited you in your office in DC a couple years ago. I thought it was so cool, like a dream to live in DC, somewhere like that. So I just hope that I can get a start here, figure out more what I want to do for the future, kind of testing things out. But for now, I just want to talk about things that I think are important to bring attention to. Mental health has always been something that's been on the forefront of my mind. My grandma, she's a therapist, so I just I'm always inspired by her, and I just want to bring more attention to other people about these issues. So
I was going to ask you
that's
why you're spending time. I mean, you could do any number of things right now, and you could intern and volunteer for any number of organizations. Did you pick NAMI because of your grandmother's work? Is there something else that brought you into this field?
Yeah, I think that has to do a big part of it because I've just always been inspired by her. She's such a hardworking woman, and she really cares about the people around her. So, kind of want to be like that. I don't know if I would be able to be like a psychologist or anything on my own, but I think it's important to at least talk about it and have awareness, especially because that's something that people always kind of avoid. It's like a taboo thing. People don't want to talk about mental health, but I just hope to open that up a little bit.
Let me ask you two more questions, and then I want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Are you staying at home?
Yeah, trying my best to at least going to the store and stuff, but you see I'm at home right now.
But you're not
Not really.
hanging out with friends?
As much like birthday drive-bys, like, you know, that kind of thing, but not really like parties or anything. We're
Nyla,
not
just
we're
be
not
honest
that
with me.
crazy.
Just like,
I'm
are you getting together with friends and hanging out and partying and having fun, or are you
I
bored
promise no
at
parties.
home and sacrificing to make sure that you keep your parents and your grandparents and your sister safe?
Okay, I'm not a saint. I'm not saying that I stay home all the time, but I'm also not. I'm being it's like managed risk, I would say. Not very big groups or anything like that. Like the most is probably like 5 people at once, like my little friend group, but
You can't
that's
so
my
in your friend group, are you guys like in someone's house,
we like
on their front
I
yard?
don't know. I mean
So
like inside or in swimming in the backyard, something like that.
so I'm not a doctor, but I really think you have to, especially because it is spreading so quickly and so uncontrolled in Texas and in El Paso, you have to stay home. I'm gonna call your mom after this, and I'm gonna re-emphasize this with her. I don't think there can really even be managed risk of hanging out with other people right now, because we don't think at this point, or we don't know whether anyone has immunity, even if they've had COVID-19 before. And unwittingly, I think young people can spread this without showing symptoms to other people in their lives. So I'm sorry to give you such a hard time, Nyla, but I care about you and your family, and I want you guys to be safe. Here's my other question on that. And this is where I have sympathy and empathy for you. My 13-year-old who just said hello, my 12-year-old are old enough to have, you know, from time to time to see friends on social media who are hanging out with their friends and not practicing social distancing and not being safe. And so their very legitimate question to me and Amy is, well, why do all these other kids get to do this? And why are you making us stay at home? And it is breeding a lot of resentment and maybe even some hatred towards their parents right now. And it's the fear of missing out on what everyone else is doing. So how do you, when you are being a saint and you're staying at home, how do you successfully combat the FOMO that you feel, and you're like, man, I see some people hanging out and I want to go be at that party, or I want to go swim with them? How do you, or can you?
That's why I hang out with like my small group of friends, because like obviously there's other people doing like a lot more, going out on like a much larger scale, but I think like especially I know it's a little bit selfish, but this is my senior year. Like I'm not going to get anything else like out of my year, like no football games, no homecoming, like that kind of thing. So I manage that by seeing like my friends at least, so I can have a little bit of sanity.
Mm,
um but I know to an extent that's like not the best thing, but we're trying to keep my mental health in check as well. It's a
yeah.
little hard.
I can only imagine what that's like to be at that important year of your life and not to be with people. And we have a really good family friend who just graduated from El Paso High. And, you know, we were talking to them throughout the last 4 or 5 months, and just how hard it was to not really have a real graduation, or to go to parties, or to see these people that you've been with since you were in third grade maybe, and you've known them your whole life, and next year you're going to be gone and you may never come back to El Paso. You may never see them again, and you don't get that closure, or that, you know, that big party or whatever. So anyhow, my sympathies, and thank you for trying to do your best to stay home and keep the people in your life safe. I know that's not easy. And so look, I should really be the one listening to you. You are doing great work with NAMI. You're trying to make sure that more people have access to mental health care help, to social workers, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, you know, healthcare providers like your grandmother, who's helping so many people here in El Paso. And you're doing it in a state that now ranks last in the country for the number of people insured per capita, right? So more people are doing without the ability to fulfill or fill a prescription or see a doctor or go see a behavioral health specialist. And you probably know this, but our county jails in Texas are the largest provider of mental health care services in this state. And in fact, the single largest inpatient mental health care facility in a state of 29 million people in 254 counties is the county jail in Houston, Texas. So it's pretty bad here. And it's not going to get better until we start talking about it, which is I know why you wanted to have me on today. So lay it on me, Nyla. What should we be doing? What are you working on? What do you want folks who are watching to know?
So I just kind of wanted to ask you about like your insight to like accessibility to mental health care. Like the first question I have was, I found this stat on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that out of the 45.9 million adults that have diagnosable mental health conditions, only 17.9 million of them get the help that they need. And I was just wondering, like what do you think that causes this? Like people either like don't know the resources that are available to them, they can't afford it. Like, what do you think is going on, like in your experience?
I think a lot of it is affordability, and mentioning the fact that Texas has the highest rate of uninsured, refused to expand access to Medicaid. There are so many people, Nyla, that I've met who earn too much to qualify for Medicaid and access to a provider in Texas, but don't earn enough to be able to afford private insurance. And so they are completely left out. They are SOL, unable to provide for themselves and also for their family. So I'd say that that's something that we absolutely have to address. And the easiest first of many steps that we've got to take is expanding Medicaid in Texas. Second, we don't have the behavioral health capacity in the state. And that's borne out by that anecdote that I shared, or that fact that I shared, that the largest inpatient facility is a county jail. And the fact that so many people now receive their mental health care in a county jail. And some of that may seem coincidental, but I would argue that it's not. And in fact, I've met a number of people who will share with me that they have a family member who literally got arrested on purpose, tried to get arrested because they wanted to be taken to jail because their schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression stands a better chance of being treated. They have more hope that they'll receive the prescribed medications that they might need than if they're just left out on their own on the streets. And that's a very telling, sad indictment on Texas, on America, and really all of us, right? I mean, all of us are party to this. We live in a democracy. It's government of, by, and for the people. And so the people aren't doing their part right now. We can't just blame this on distant leaders or, a single party or a single person. This really is on all of us. And that's not to say that some of us aren't doing more than others to try to fix this, but until it's fixed, that's a responsibility that we all bear. And then there's just the, and you kind of address this, but there's the stigma involved in people stepping up and talking about help that they might need, and not wanting that to count against them in their career, whether they're in the military, whether they're in business, whether they're in academic life, whatever it is that they're pursuing, whatever it is that they're doing. So I think those are a few of the things that we should be looking at that need to change if we're going to improve outcomes for the people that we care about.
Do you think that access to mental health care and just like healthcare in general has been like stretched too thin because of coronavirus? Like now more people need these resources, but they're just like not available to like the people that need them. Like I saw on KTSM an article about a local psychiatrist who was talking about like how there just wasn't enough like to take care of like the influx of patients that they have. So do you think that the isolation caused by the pandemic has like worsened this problem?
I would defer to you and to experts and to the practitioners who are actually caring for their patients. But what you just described makes a lot of intuitive or common sense, that when people have less ability to leave their homes safely, when so much of the medical community is understandably focused on addressing the hospitalizations resulting from COVID, when the governor has prohibited elective surgeries so that he frees up hospital capacity for these COVID patients. It just reminds us that all hands are on deck for a specific, very real threat that we all face. But in so doing, we may leave other challenges unaddressed, and we may even further reduce an already very shallow capacity for mental health care treatment and access and care in Texas. So that makes sense. And I wonder, Nyla, and this is something I don't know anything about, but I wonder if we are seeing a dramatic increase in telemedicine and video therapy to try to begin to address that or make up for that. I don't know if that is the case, but I've got to think also just the fact that we are so many of us in our homes all the time without break. So many of our fellow Texans have lost their jobs. I think in the first 2 months of the pandemic, twice as many Texans filed for unemployment as did in all of 2019. So the stress that's there when you're home all the time with your family or by yourself, the fact that you may have lost your job and your source of income, and also kind of what you might see as your purpose or your function in life or in the world, underlying mental health care issues that may have not been addressed. I mean, all that now can come to the fore and can be a real challenge for someone to address. And then there's this, Nyla, which I'm sure you know, but for so many of our fellow Texans, their health care is tied to their employment. And now that they've lost their employment, what they may have been able to treat through employer-sponsored health insurance, they may not yet be enrolled or qualify for Medicaid, and again, just be out of luck. And I can only imagine the suffering and the pain and the consequences of the callousness with which we treat people here, that we tie their insurance to their employer, or that we don't make it easy for everyone to see a mental health care provider or a primary care provider, regardless of their station in life or their income or their circumstances. So yeah, I can imagine it's a lot tougher for people right now.
Yeah, because something that's been on my mind lately, that a couple weeks ago, this girl, her name's Charlie Tenen, she graduated from Coronado High School this year. She took her own life a couple weeks ago. Her psychologist called the police department to report a patient in imminent danger. And when they checked in on her, the officers that responded said that she seemed all right and nothing seemed like off with her and she was okay. And they left and she took her own life a couple hours later. And I just want to know what can be done to stop people from falling through the cracks like that, and that they can actually get the help that they need without like having to go through that again.
I'm so sorry to hear that, and I didn't know about that, and so I'm sorry for your loss and all of her friends, and certainly for her family. And you're right, that's not something that she or her family should have had to go through. And really, as grateful as we should be for the police officers who are placed in really challenging, difficult situations like these, it shouldn't be the police who are responding. And I think one of the very good ideas that have come forward through the movement that looks to rethink what policing looks like in America, or even defunding or refunding the police, or funding them in a different way, is just taking a critical look at what we ask police officers to do. And what if instead of a police officer, it was a social worker or a therapist or a behavioral health specialist, or someone who would know the right questions to ask of her, or the right help to offer, or the right things to look for. I mean, there are people who are trained in the signs of suicidal ideation, and they know what those signs are, and they know the things to ask and to look for and to listen for. You want that person there on the scene, not somebody who's wearing guns and, bulletproof vest and is trained in some part, or looks like they're trained for combat, and may be better used stopping somebody who's going to take somebody's life, or committing a serious crime. So that's one thought, is to change how we as a city and a community engage and interact with people who are really just needing mental health care help. And instead of doing that with our police, let's do it with mental health care providers and specialists. But thanks for sharing that. Again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your input on that. Kind of switching gears a little bit, I just wanted to ask about El Paso in general. Do you think being a border community presents specific challenges when it comes to mental health? Do we struggle with things that other places might not know go on?
I don't know. I don't know that our border dynamic, I just don't know. So an admission of ignorance on this. I would think that the fact that we are one of the poorest urban counties in the United States of America, in a state that already has denied so many millions of our fellow Texans access to mental health care or any kind of health care, I think that probably makes things especially hard. We also have, and you may know this, Nyla, but we have a much lower Medicaid reimbursement rate for providers here in El Paso than you do in Houston or Dallas. And private insurance reimbursement rates key off the public reimbursement rates, which means that you earn less in El Paso for providing the same care that you would provide in Houston or Dallas or another part of the state. And so then it makes it even harder to recruit the providers and specialists that we need to treat and take care of our fellow El Pasoans. And I remember looking at the data a few years back, and we have a doctor to patient ratio and a nurse to patient ratio in El Paso that is on par with a developing country, not the wealthiest, most powerful country on the face of the planet. So I think that has a lot more to do with it. I think, this is, again, just from my perspective and a personal observation, our connection with Mexico and Ciudad Juarez, the quality of life in El Paso, the kindness of the people in this community, the gorgeous sky that we all woke up to this morning. I've got to think all those things are net positives and benefits to our lives. But as powerful as all those things are, I don't know that they can make up for the fact that there are people who are suffering needlessly, who, if we would just extend them the help to see a provider and actually pay those providers, commensurate with the service they provide, we could treat and we could help.
I just saw a comment in the corner of my eye about veteran health. I know that when you were in Congress, you served on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Do you think that being home to such a large military base presents its own unique issues with mental health as well?
It does, and I believe Fort Bliss, with roughly 30 to 32,000 active duty service members, is the largest installation to deploy service members to points all over the world, and is the largest installation to receive those returning service members when they come back from Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Syria, Germany, Korea, everywhere. We're deployed in more than 100 countries right now, and so many of those who are deployed all of those who are deployed in some way are putting their lives on the line for this country, and some are staring down death far more frequently than others, and certainly more frequently than you and I are, and may have, in their service to this country, taken the lives of other people or watched the lives of their fellow service members being taken right before them. So they come back with some very singular, unique experiences, and they come back to a country that has never funded the VA commensurate with the number of service members and now veterans who need mental health care help. The incidence of traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder because of the wars that we've been fighting. How old are you? What year
17.
were you born, Nyla?
2002.
Yeah, so before you were born, we started wars that we're still fighting today. And that has taken a toll on those service members who've stepped up to fight them. And yet, though we spent all the money to send them off and to outfit them and to arm them and to spend hundreds of billions of dollars in these other countries, we've never spent enough to take care of them when they come back. And because of that, the latest estimate that you have from the VA is that 20 veterans will have killed themselves by the end of the day today. 20 veterans will kill themselves tomorrow. 20 veterans will kill themselves each and every single day until we make a massive investment in the personnel and the protocols and the access to care that is missing right now for veterans. And then there's this, which is going to seem obvious to you, but unfortunately has not seemed obvious to those who make these decisions. We've got to stop going to war. We've got to stop putting people into this position unless there's absolutely no other alternative. So in the war in Afghanistan, in the war in Iraq and Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, stop going to war, stop starting new wars unless there's no other choice but to go to war. And that's not the dynamic that exists right now. So yeah, it's a big challenge in the military and for our veterans, and then particularly in El Paso, which is such a strong military community with so many tens of thousands of veterans living here.
Yeah, we just need to do better to support the people that are trying to fight for us, even like in wars that maybe we shouldn't have gone to. They were still put through it, and they need to be supported. That's right. For the work that they did. Yeah. That's right. I'm also seeing a lot of comments about like still going off of what we were talking about the police and like the responsibilities that they have. And I just wanted to talk like kind of on a broad scale. Like I know that these conversations are very difficult to have, especially for people that have never had them before. But why do you think having these difficult conversations about like race and inequality and like just the police and changing the system like are important?
Ask that a different way in terms of police here in El Paso.
So I'm just wondering, because I know that there's like a lot of just tension between people like talking about just like race and inequality and like arguments about like what police should and shouldn't be doing. Like, why is it important to have these conversations to open up people to like maybe considering like a different point of view?
Yeah, great question. So it's such a good question. I don't even know how to begin to answer it, except to say, as a white guy, I have not experienced what Black men and Black women, Black girls and Black boys have had to live under for as long as we've been a country, and even before we were a country. There is, if you haven't read it, Nyla, and for those who are watching who may not have read it, there's this extraordinary project that you can find on the New York Times website called the 1619 Project that was spearheaded by Nicole Hannah-Jones. And Nyla, it basically makes the case that this country was founded on slavery 401 years ago. First time that someone was kidnapped from Africa, brought here against their will, made to begin building the wealth of this country that they would never enjoy, and that their descendants 401 years later are not equally allowed to enjoy in still to this day. And how it has defined literally every aspect of American life. So yes, criminal justice, yes, officer-involved killings of unarmed Black men, women, boys, and girls, but also the ability to buy a home, the ability to be paid a living wage, the ability to see a doctor. So we have a healthcare access issue that you and I have been talking about. It is far worse for Black Texans than it is for white Texans here. And it's far worse for white Americans, for Black Americans than it is for white Americans. When you look at who is dying of COVID right now, it's not disproportionately white people. It's disproportionately Latinos in the state of Texas, African Americans here, and broadly across the country. It's in banking and the ability to get a loan. It is in literally every part of American life. So I think that's one big part of the conversation that you need to have before you look at policing, because policing is symptomatic of a much larger systemic, foundational, endemic problem in America when it comes to justice and when it comes to race. Having said that, there is a very long history, beginning at the very end of Reconstruction, probably even before then, in the 1870s, of the police being used to keep Black Americans down, to arrest Black Americans to satisfy needs, like at the Imperial Sugar Plantation in just outside of Houston, Texas, in the early 20th century, to keep African Americans from being able to exercise their right to vote, which happened throughout the former Confederacy, including in the state of Texas, and to attempt to keep them in a state of fear and at disadvantage relative to the white majority population in the United States of America, the white minority population here in the state of Texas. So let's not just pin this on the police. This one is on America, and it's certainly a much larger problem than just the criminal justice system. Having said all that, you look at what's happened in Texas. You know, Sandra Bland, I'm sure, Nyla, you know her story, but 5 years ago this week, she was arrested in Waller County, which has an atrocious history of institutionalized racism against the Black residents there. She is changing lanes, really trying to get out of the way of a Department of Public Safety cruiser. That DPS officer pulls her over for failing to signal the lane change. She was just trying to get out of his way because he was speeding up right behind her. She's treated less than a human by that officer, who then enters into a physical altercation with her during the course of that arrest. She is later found dead in her cell in the county jail in Waller County. And it's very clear that Sandra Bland was stopped, was arrested, was jailed, and died for being Black in Waller County. There's a Tatiana Jefferson who was at home minding her own business. She'd inadvertently left the front door open. A neighbor of hers called the police, really just looking for a welfare check to make sure she was okay. She was watching her nephew in her bedroom. A white police officer outside in the yard sees a Tatiana Jefferson in her own home, but because she's a Black woman, he draws his gun and shoots her dead. Botham Jean, Black man in his own apartment. White police officer walks in, shoots him dead. And then there's this, Nyla. After they killed him in cold blood, for no good reason whatsoever, the police leaked the information that they found a small amount of weed in his apartment, as if to say, look, this fucker had it coming to him. He's Black, he's got drugs, you know, so we shot him. Maybe we shouldn't have shot him, but, you know, he's Black and he had drugs. That's the kind of stuff that happens on a day in, day out basis in this state to our fellow Texans who happen to be African American. And they disproportionately fill our prisons in the largest prison population on the face of the planet, bar none, right here in the United States. And it's all part of a larger structural problem that we have in this country. So that's more than you wanted to know and more than you asked about, but it is all connected. And until we're willing to have that conversation and just be dead honest with one another about what we are doing to our fellow human beings and our fellow Americans in this country, we will not make it better. But I think to be optimistic for a second, having gone to the Black Lives Matter, one of the first marches in El Paso after George Floyd was publicly murdered, and seeing all the amazing young leaders who showed up. They don't have offices, they're not in positions of power, and yet they're doing more than anyone who is in elected office right now to make this a better country. And they're already forcing some of the changes, you know, local police departments banning chokeholds, the Congress passing a sweeping bill that addresses many of the problems that we have in policing in America. They made that happen. And so that gives me hope and a little bit of optimism that we still have a chance to get this right. So anyhow,
It's
thanks for
definitely.
asking.
Oh
One,
yeah, thank you.
one
Oh,
comment I want to read to you, Nyla. This is from a friend who is watching us. And she writes me, she says, healthcare covers so little of what someone who deals with mental health needs. Even typical psychotherapy is minimally covered. $70 to $100 a session after the application of the best insurance. So even if you're insured, which is, very few people in the state of Texas, even with insurance, $70 to $100 a visit, even if you've got the best kind of insurance. And so it makes it very difficult for people who are in need of consistent, high quality care. And then that's not even to mention the recruitment challenge that we have in getting those kinds of therapists here to El Paso. So I wanted to read that comment out.
I just think it's important to be having these conversations for that exact reason, because mental health is just so not accessible for the people that need it. Like, they either can't afford it because insurance doesn't cover it in the way that like people need it to be covered, because not everybody has like that much money to pay like deductibles or whatever. And like people also just they definitely like have a stigma against mental health because it's been something that's been so pushed away, and just like, don't talk about it. If you don't talk about it, it'll just go away. But it's something that so many people struggle with, so we just need to like open the conversation like to everybody for that.
Yeah, well, that's why I was so happy to join you today. It really impressed me that you reached out to me to join you in a conversation about mental health care, when there are, again, understandably, so many other things that people in this community and throughout this country are focused on right now. And yet there's always seemingly a good excuse not to address mental health care, right? There's always something seemingly, although it's not, seemingly more important. And that helps to explain how we got to where we are today. All those statistics that you and I just shared about how hard it is to get help in Texas right now. So I think in some small way, but in a very important way, you're helping to bring light to this and to elevate the conversation. And hopefully enough of us talking to those who are currently in office or those who will be in office after November make a strong enough impression to get the kind of change that we need, including fundamentally access to people who are going without right now.
Well, yeah, that's how you make change. Like, you start a conversation about it, and then everybody, like, it just starts to gain momentum, and then more and more people are talking about it till it becomes something that people in power can't ignore, and like they really have to turn their heads and pay attention to the people that are demanding the change that they need.
Nyla, stay at home. Don't go out. If you go
Yes,
out,
sir.
wear a
Yes,
mask.
sir.
Stay 12 feet away from any of your friends. And just know this is going to be over at some point. I wish I could say soon. I don't know that it's going to be over soon, if we're going to be honest with each other. This is going to be over at some point. And I know that you are rolling into your senior year, and that's for, a lot of us, that's a really special time in our lives. And somehow or other, life's going to make it back up to you, but stay at home now, right? And because if you do, then I can tell Ulysses and Molly and Henry, look, Nyla is staying home, so you guys got to be cool about staying home here too.
Okay, I'll be a better role model. I'll try better.
Good. Yeah. Take that
Well,
responsibility.
I know you're a busy man, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I really appreciate you joining me today to talk about this. It's really important to have these conversations, and I know you know a lot and you're very passionate about the things you're talking about. So I know everybody here appreciates listening to you, and I know I appreciate it. So thank you.
Best of luck, and please tell your sister, your mom, and your dad, and your grandparents, all of whom I love, that we say hello. We're thinking about them. And you may want to put in a shameless plug for one of the best restaurants in El Paso. If anyone is looking for a great takeout dinner tonight, Nyla, where do they go?
Salt and Honey El Paso, Bakery Cafe. Love that place. My mom, so I'm biased. Yeah. Salt and honey. Just visit us.
Do it. Okay. Well, be safe. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Thank you. Okay. Well, I guess this will just be my little outro. I'm Nyla Haj. Like I said, I'm going to be a senior at Coronado High School, and I'm the social media intern here at NAMI. So thank you guys for joining us for a live. Yeah, thank you.